So boom, Sir Greene, student Dr. Greene, talking to me from Fairbanks, Alaska. Welcome to Talk Mental Health with Logan Noon, and boom, we're recording.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on the show, on your
Dude,
podcast.
dude, I'm a little sad you don't have a mustache right now, I must admit.
Yeah, I mean, I could easily turn it into a mustache.
But yeah,
The
I'm
day.
still going strong. I started late because I was afraid to do it in neurology. I was like, I don't think patients can take me serious with the mustache. But now that I'm on my OPP rotation, it's like all in, baby.
You're going for the handlebars.
I don't know, just kind of like that classy 80s porn stash kind of thing. That's the look I'm going for. With a little bit of scruff. This
Yeah.
is actually a video recording even today, so we could even put this out for the fans, the audience,
Nice,
showing this
nice.
beautiful stash.
How many listeners are there on the podcast?
Every episode ranges from anywhere from 100 to 200-ish,
Okay,
and
awesome.
kind of ebbs and flows. It's always funny to see like around holidays or around any kind of travel period, the listeners go up. Because
Yeah,
like when people are on a flight, they could actually listen to a podcast or something like that. So that's always
right.
fun to watch. And sometimes it's like some of the old episodes randomly pop up. Like, so they don't always get listened to right when I release them. Maybe they get featured in some random place that I don't even know about on the internet.
Right, right. Well, that's
Like
cool, man.
like this one's gonna surface on uh ministers who've left.com.
Those who have gone astray.
To the dark side. Yeah, today's going to be a very interesting story. I know you, of course, very, very well. And so I've heard, I think, most of the story, but I definitely have not heard all of it. So it's going to be a good
Yeah.
story. We're talking about essentially like a journey of spirituality. And spirituality is so intertwined with mental health that it's going to be a very interesting story. I think religion does a lot of great things for mental health. I think religion can also sometimes hurt mental health. And I'm interested to talk about that. And dude, student Dr. Greene, Ben Greene, welcome on.
Thank you, student Dr. Noon. Happy to be here. We've been talking about this for a while.
So I guess let's just you you essentially, when did you know you wanted to go to like pursue becoming a Catholic minister?
Yeah.
Like, how did that
So,
even start?
yeah, and I
You were
think
a
it all.
lad. You were a lad from Idaho, just a
That's
young
right.
lad.
That's right. And that has a lot to do with it because my hometown of Cottonwood, Idaho, located in north central Idaho, right on the Idaho, Oregon, Washington border, small little German Catholic town of about 900 people. And I would say when I was a kid, it was probably 90% Catholic.
I believe it. Yeah.
So, most of the town is Catholic. Anybody who would come into the town and wasn't Catholic was pretty much like an outsider. You were
Wow.
on, yeah, you were just in the, you're not ostracized, but just kind of in the out group.
Hmm.
So that definitely had a lot to do with me going to first the minor seminary for high school kids, and then later on the major seminary for college kids to pursue the priesthood. Just to give you an idea of how Catholic it was, I mean, I went to public school, and there was actually during the last period of class on Wednesdays, we had Catholic CCD class. And
Mandatory?
it wasn't mandatory, not mandatory,
Okay.
but if you didn't want to attend, you would just have study hall.
Oh, it was like at the school.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was during school hours. It was the last class of the day. So I
Wow.
would say of a class of maybe 30 to 35 kids, probably 33 would go, and there would be like two kids left in the classroom doing their study hall. So pretty much the whole class went.
Because it was like
Um,
a social hour, I imagine.
well, yeah, it was kind of a social hour, but yeah, kind of a goof off class to be honest. Um, but yeah, anyway, that's just to give you an idea of how Catholic like Cottonwood, Idaho was and still is today.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
So you were born into this extremely Catholic already environment,
Extremely Catholic.
outside of even just your family.
Exactly.
It was everyone around you kind of thing.
Exactly. And I should also mention, like in the 1980s, the Camas Prairie, which is the area around Cottonwood, we're talking like a 30 square mile radius. There were probably between 10 to 15 young men who actually went to become priests. So it was very common. Like, it wasn't a shock to people. Everybody in the town pretty much knew somebody who left to become a Catholic priest.
Wait, 10 out of how many were in your graduating class?
Not my graduating class. I'm just
Oh,
saying,
okay.
like in the 1980s, over a 10-year span,
Oh, I see.
every year, somebody would leave to become a priest.
Okay. So still very common. You weren't the first one in your town to go do this.
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. So I've kind of lost the original question now.
Well, and it's just so, but I mean, at the end of the day, though, even in a town like that, most people don't go and be a minister. They are born into this very Catholic environment, but still you went the extra mile and were like, I want to do this. This is going to be, it really, if medicine is, you're a medical student, I guess we should have said that at the top of the show. So we're medical students together. So you're in a totally different career path now, but that's totally encompassing. But I think being in like the Catholic faith as a minister, that's even more encompassing. There's so many lifestyle things that you have to sacrifice and challenges. It's like,
right.
So why did you think like, you know what, that's the path I want to go. I want to be like celibate. Right. I want to,
right.
It's a wild, wild, wild choice.
It is. It's pretty radical. And a lot of people ask me when I tell them that I left home at 13 years old to go to a minor seminary, which I alluded to earlier, which is simply it's a high school that it's built around getting high school young men to become priests, right?
Okay.
So I left home at 13 years old, and everybody asked me, so why did you leave so young? Like the same question that you asked me, how did you know? Like, that's a radical decision. Did your parents like force you to go, or they just kick you out of the house? So my dad lost his job. He was a high school teacher. He lost his job. We won't go into the details there, but he lost his job. He got really fed up with the public school system, and he pulled my older brother Gabe and myself out of the public school system, and he decided to homeschool us for 1 year.
Interesting.
And there was a Catholic school in town, but it only went up to, I think, 8th grade. So my younger brother was in the Catholic school. My brother and I were homeschooled. We hated it. we absolutely hated it. We were away from our friends. We weren't playing, school sports.
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad was upset at the school and pretty much like isolated us. We already lived up in the mountains, like 8 miles out of town on this mountainside, but it was just terrible, man. I mean,
yeah. So going back to school, to like a seminary school, even if it was school, was like, all right, like I can get down with this.
Yeah. So it wasn't like, hey, I want to become a priest. It was more like, oh, I had a friend from my class who had gone to this school in New Hampshire, and he would come back and visit, and I would see him around Christmas time in the summertime, and he would tell me all about the school, and it looked cool. It was a private school, beautiful, beautiful school built on Lake Winnipesaukee, beautiful like gymnasium built by actually Willis Reed paid for the gym at the school, the New York Knicks basketball.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So like NBA floor, wood floor gym. And so I was like, shoot, I'm going to go check this place out. I'm tired of homeschooling. Let's check this place out. So I went to the summer program, and this is in the summer of 1998, and I loved it. I loved it. And so I just decided, let's give it a shot. Let's go to school here. I've always been adventurous. It's on the other side of the country.
And
And
going to that school though, is that like then the decision I'm definitely going to be a minister, or is it still like I'm just dipping my toes?
it was more like I'm just having fun as a young kid.
So you didn't have to commit to anything yet to the
Correct.
Catholic Church as well. Okay, okay.
That's right. Yeah, I wasn't committed yet. Um, I should back up a little bit and say that, my family was extremely Catholic. Um, and I mean, I should also say I love my parents, I respect them a lot.
Well, of
Um,
course, they're lovely people. I've met them.
yes. But we had priests at our house all the time. And actually, some of the priests that ran the school in New Hampshire had visited my house, talked to my parents, had winter camps at my house for a bunch of Catholic kids.
Okay.
So it was like I'm going to this school a long ways away from home, thousands of miles away from home, but I know some of the people there. They've been to my
Yeah.
house, know my family. So it was a fairly easy transition.
Okay.
Um, I did bawl myself to sleep for like the first 3 months I was there, just being a homesick.
Well, I mean, yeah, you were how
I was
old? Like
I was
six,
13. I
oh,
was 13.
13.
I was
Damn.
13 years
Yeah.
old. Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
But you grew to
Um,
love it.
I loved it. I always loved it. I mean, that's why I stayed there. I could have left any time.
Uh-huh.
But it was challenging being away from home, being away from my brothers. So I would go home at Christmas for a week, and then I would go home for summer for about 2 weeks in July. And that was it. I saw
Okay.
my parents and my family for 3 weeks out of the entire year.
Well, and I guess also allow the listener to understand, like, okay, what does really seminary school mean? Like, what did your day
Yeah.
look like? Because I know it was intense.
I mean, looking back on it, I'm like, wow, that was extremely regimented. So we would get up every morning. It was an open dormitory where we would sleep.
All guys, of course, right?
200 guys, yeah. I mean, high school kids. It was from sixth grade all the way through high school. In this open dorm, they would flip the lights on, like these bright neon, not neon, but
Yeah, fluorescent lights, yeah.
fluorescent lights, like bam, in your face. And then they would start to say this prayer. They would say, Christ our King, and then everybody would respond, your kingdom come, and then they would start like praying this
Okay.
prayer as you're making your bed and putting your swimming
And
trunks
what
on.
time of day was this?
This is at 6 a.m.
Yeah, yeah.
This is 6
Every
a.m. man.
day.
This is how we would wake up every single morning. So
Damn.
you'd put your swimming trunks on underneath the covers, make your bed, you know, tuck your sheets in, everything like military style, and then
Uh-huh.
you would run to the showers
Okay.
and shower, and then the rest of the day was on a schedule. We would have morning prayers at, I think it was like 6:30. So you had a half an hour to get ready. You'd have a half an hour meditation, and then you'd have church service, breakfast, chores, and then your day would start. Your classes would start.
Okay.
Extremely regimented, though, like a
And
military school almost.
and when did your day end? Was it going all the way to like 9 at night kind of thing was
Yeah,
scheduled?
about 9. Yeah, so we'd have recreation, like basketball or soccer. Sometimes we'd play capture the flag or hockey on the lake in the winter, and
Okay.
then we'd have dinner, and then we'd have a night activity, which sometimes was band practice or choir, or sometimes we'd have board games. Other times we would have like urbanity class where they would teach us like etiquette and how to eat and how to
Okay.
sit properly at the table and things like that. Then we'd have night prayers about 9 o'clock, and we'd be in bed probably around 9:30.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you just must have been all about it, love and life. I can picture you getting, of course, really into the sports. It's hard
Yeah.
for me to almost imagine you getting super into the actual Catholicism aspect because I've only known you post this almost transition in your life. But
Yeah.
even so, you loved it to the point where, like, what percentage of the school ended up fully committing to becoming a minister and doing what you did and like training at the Vatican, the whole 9 yards, like doing
Yeah.
everything. Did everybody do that, or was it only a few?
So in the summer program of 1998, I think there were right around 36 of us who joined that year in the ninth grade class. That's just one class. Of those 36, I want to say 3 that I know of became priests.
Oh, wow. So still a vast majority of people didn't do it.
Yeah, vast majority.
Oh, okay. Okay. So,
Yeah.
man, I guess I'm just having a weird understanding. I thought almost everybody did it. So even at that school, you stood out in the crowd of like, I want to continue to go further with this kind of thing.
Well, I would say of the 36, a good 30 of us made it to like the major seminary where we were in the cassock with the white collar,
Okay.
further along. But of those 36, only 3 actually were ordained ministers of the Catholic priesthood. A lot of us made it like pretty far,
Okay.
in like 7, 8, 9 years into it. But yeah, just 3 actually became priests.
Interesting. So you then you like graduated from that school and
Mhm.
then did you move right to Italy to continue your training here?
No, then I became your next door neighbor in Cheshire, Connecticut.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. So the major seminary was in Connecticut. And I should say, just so that you can understand, the audience can understand, it was a very happy like high school environment.
Yeah.
We hear a lot about sexual abuse, priests, sexually abusing altar boys or
You
kids. And
learn about it, or what are you saying?
I'm just saying, the media in the last
Oh,
few
oh,
years
oh.
has been portraying that, and that was never my experience.
Hmm.
I really looked up to the priests. I admired them. I admired them as a kid, and I still do to this day. I keep in touch with some of them
Yeah.
through Facebook, and sometimes we talk on the phone. Um, but I should say that it was really, really kind of ingrained in us to become priests. Like it was almost like they were telling us continuously in meditation and in the spirituality classes, like God wants you to become a priest. Like
And
this is
maybe
your
like this is the
calling.
most gratifying thing you could ever do.
Yeah, this is like the greatest thing you can do with your life and the greatest calling you can have on earth. You're really lucky to have this calling. And so honestly, it never crossed my mind when I was in high school. Oh, I never went to prom. Oh, I'm not playing high school football. Oh, I could be a doctor. I could be a lawyer. I could be a firefighter. It never even crossed my mind. It was always, I'm going to become a priest.
Huh.
Just because that had been so ingrained in me at the school.
Interesting. Yeah. And
So,
it's just
guys, sorry to interrupt you, but
go ahead.
guys who didn't go to Cheshire to the major seminary, it was almost like, oh, that's weird. Like, there's something wrong with them, or like, what's going on? Like,
Yeah.
everybody's supposed to go to Cheshire and just continue on. You're not supposed to leave.
Huh. Because then from my side of this conversation, I grew up going to church with my parents, but I was never really that into it. I just kind of did it to make my parents sort of happy. There was a
Yeah,
brief moment in my life where I was kind of into it, and I thought about studying it further, and I was like, I like ordering. I could be a priest maybe, and that was maybe a day of my life. And then I eventually evolved to becoming an atheist, I think, as I am now. And as I listen to your story, this sounds almost politically incorrect in a sense, but it almost sounds like a brainwashing kind of thing, like a mentorship, but almost
yeah,
like like it's almost too much. When I think of medicine, there was no one pushing me to say you have to do this. If anything,
yeah,
there's people telling me don't do it.
yeah. And I've been trying to reconcile that, or just kind of ponder that a little bit more. And I don't like to use the word brainwashing, but there's certain aspects of that, I would say. But I don't think with like an evil intention. I
And like you
really
said, most of the priests you knew, I'm sure, were very, very good people. And I've known a lot of priests and ministers of different faiths. And throughout my life, because I grew up in a small town, at the end of the day, they were all extremely good, nice people.
yeah, yeah, that's right. I don't think they had bad intentions. I think they really just believed in the power of the priesthood, and they wanted other young men to follow in their footsteps and
Hmm.
help people get to heaven. It's like, hey, like, we're on earth to help people get to heaven. We need a lot of priests, so you should become a priest.
Yeah, it's you. I feel like you hear that same concept throughout so many religions, like we need to save people kind of thing, like
Yeah,
because or else they're going to hell kind of thing. I remember having
right.
interesting conversations with my cousins who have different perspectives on all this than I do, and saying, well, we're just trying to save people from hell. And I always respond kind of like, well, how do you know there's a hell? Like, but this is not my story. This is yours today. So you're at the seminary in Connecticut, and you continue your training. You
Right,
eventually get to the Vatican. I know you spent time in Mexico, right, doing your
right.
training. But I guess I want to just to so we don't talk for 3 hours here. Although
Yeah.
your story is so interesting, what I want to know is like throughout this journey, at what point did the first kind of well, I don't know about this. Was it a slow gradual thing or was it one specific interaction? I know there was a beautiful lady in Mexico you told me about kind of thing
Right,
where like it just changed your outlook on your life because if I went to a Catholic undergrad, so I of course know Catholicism pretty well. But for people who don't really know Catholicism pretty well, being a minister means you're celibate. You're not having sex with any women, and of
that's
course
right.
you're not have sex with any men. But like you, whatever. Um, and you don't have a family. You're just almost like a
Yeah,
servant of God, a servant of the
that's right,
people, and it is a very noble
right.
profession. I'm not trying to knock it, but it is a very different life kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, absolutely. So the priest, the minister, the pastor, tries to live a life like Jesus Christ. I know there's debate on this, but Christ was celibate, and so the priest is celibate, doesn't have a family, and as a religious priest, which is a little bit different from the parish priest who works in an actual church, the
Oh, okay.
religious missionary takes the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, whereas the parish priest just takes the vow of chastity and obedience, not poverty. So
Huh.
he does have a salary, the parish priest.
Interesting. And
We do
you
not.
went the religious route, correct?
Correct. I was a missionary, religious missionary.
Wow. Okay. I
Um,
mean, of course, there's not a lot of money in becoming, well, maybe you could argue otherwise on that point. But, it's not like a parish priest is making a lot of money, is what I'm trying to say, kind of thing.
yeah,
And you
yeah,
decided even like, I don't even value any of that right now. Interesting.
yeah, yeah. So getting back to your question though, like where was that? Um, when was that moment and the circumstances of that moment where I decided or I started to think, hey, maybe this isn't for me? It was definitely in Mexico. So I finished my bachelor's degree in Rome, and they all gathered us in this auditorium, and they just called us up one by one, and they gave us an envelope. And you would just open up the envelope. You had no idea where in the world you were going to go and practice
Ah,
as a missionary. No
uh-huh.
idea. You could go anywhere. So I thought I would come back to the United States and work in that high school
Yeah.
where I had gone. And I opened up the letter and it said, you're going to be an instructor of formation at the Cumbres Institute in Guadalajara, Mexico.
Okay.
Like, where? I don't even know where that's at, you know? Um,
And
so
at
I was,
that time, did you even speak Spanish?
I spoke broken Spanish.
Okay. Okay. Poquito.
It
Okay.
wasn't great. Yeah, un poquito. So I was sent to Guadalajara and I worked in an all boys Catholic school and I worked with the kids from fifth grade all the way through high school. And it was the first time that I really got to see family life. outside of the walls of the seminary, and that sounds strange to a lot of people, but these kids.
Well, and Guadalajara is a huge, huge city, of course, and you grew up in a very small place, and
Yeah,
it makes sense.
yeah. And the Mexican culture, they admire priests a lot, and there's a lot of respect. So a lot of the families would invite me to dinner at their house, and I just met a lot of incredible families.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I mean, I can't have this as a priest. Like, they look so happy. And of course, family life isn't easy, and there's a lot of challenges, but it just it made me think. Should I be doing this? So I would say going to dinner with these families is what first kind of made me doubt a little bit my priestly calling. And then one of these kids, I got pretty close to him in the sense that we just got along really well. You hit it off with people. So I would have dinner with his family, and I mean, there was a young Mexican lady who was like really beautiful, and I felt my heart for the first time. I was like, wow, I am really attracted to this person. Like, this has never happened to me before. Whoa, what's going on? You know what I mean? And I'm 20. I'm
like, 20. Oh, this robe is not too concealing.
Right? And gosh, I remember talking to my spiritual director about this.
Yeah.
One of the priests you just talk to about the struggles and difficulties you're having, and I just told him, like, wow, I'm really attracted to this woman. Like, holy smokes, what's going on? I thought, I'm supposed to have this shield or something where I don't have these
like a child of God, or out of whatever expression it is.
Yeah. And I mean, he basically just went on to tell me, this is normal. You're a normal human being. You're going to be attracted to these people. But they said, well, why don't you go back to Rome and finish your philosophy degree, finish your master's in philosophy, and think about it a little bit more if you want to have a family and pursue that, or if you want to become a priest.
Damn, so right away they're like, all right, yo, Benny's slipping. We got to get him away from Margarita. She's about to take him down. And so how quick was that? Were they just like, you're going to Rome next week? Or was it like, oh, we're going to send you in a few months?
Yeah. So this happened probably in my third year when I was in Guadalajara. So I'd already been there 2.5 years. I was supposed to go back to Rome anyway at the end of 2 years. So sometimes you can do a 4th year, but they said, no, we're cutting it off at 3, go back to Rome.
Okay.
So it wasn't like,
it wasn't weird. Okay, I see.
Or like 6 months and like, okay, you need to go back. We're going to lose him if we don't get him back to Rome. No.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then I went back to Rome, finished my master's in philosophy, and then I was supposed to make perpetual vows for the rest of my life: poverty, chastity, and obedience. And I remembered that Mexican woman. And I was like, man, I don't think I can do this.
Well, and it's just so, you were feeling just such natural things. Like, we all hopefully have a sexual preference for something. I guess there's asexual people out there, but I think it's good to be like sexual, right? Like, it brings happiness. It's like, it feels good, so the feeling, especially we're older men now in our 30s or whatever. At that time, whatever you were, 20s or teenagers, like 20. Those kind of desires are obviously extremely strong at that age of your life.
Right.
And to live in a way where you're suppressing a feeling that's so natural is so foreign to me. Like, it's hard for me to even imagine, no sex, no, you can't even flirt with a girl, you can't even, of course, masturbate or anything like that. Like, that just, all of that just seems like you were living in a different planet, different world.
And I truly was, man. I truly was living in a different world. And I look back on it, it's like a totally different life,
Yes. Yes.
Totally different life that I'm grateful that I had.
Yes.
But yes, a completely different life.
And so, okay, you're back in Rome. You finish up your master's degree or whatever, and then you're about to take this massive next step where then it
Right.
seems like then it's like all chips all
That's
in.
right. It's it.
And
Like,
you
I'm
decided
becoming a
to do
priest.
what?
So I wrote a letter to the general director of the congregation. And I said, hey, look, Father, I am so grateful for the years that I have had here, but I don't feel like at this point I can make that decision responsibly of poverty,
Hmm.
chastity, and obedience for the rest of my life. So could I please be sent back to pastoral ministry just to give it a second look, to try
Okay.
again and see if I really want to do this for the rest of my life?
And you were like, preferably Guadalajara.
They didn't send me to Guadalajara. They sent me to Santiago, Chile.
Okay, okay.
Um, so I was there for about 6 months, and it became very, very clear to me, crystal clear, that the priesthood wasn't my calling. One day, as I was walking across the soccer field after school, I saw this dad playing soccer with his son and teaching his son how to kick the soccer ball into the goal. The kid must
Yeah.
have been 3 years old. And I walked past him and the dad and the son, and I thought to myself, man, as a priest, you're never going to be able to do this with your children or your son. And
Huh.
that one thought crushed me. It crushed me. And that's how I knew for sure this wasn't my calling. It wasn't my calling to become a priest. And so I let my spiritual director know, I think I need to leave. And I wrote a letter to the general director. And after a few months, got my paperwork in order and left.
Well, a couple things, and I think this is a good point of the story to pause on. I remember, when I made a big life change and decision, and my story, of course, is extremely different, but my big life change was to live openly about my bipolar disorder, and that decision was what led me to medical school.
Yeah.
Similar to, it seems like, where we're going with your story leading to medical school. But it was that same kind of epiphany, was actually thinking about my future kids. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember thinking like, well, statistically, I want kids, and statistically, they're going to have bipolar disorder. And so what kind of world do I want them to live in? A world where they're supposed to be not talking about this, or a world where they have people to look up to? And that
Right.
was my epiphany. And so when you were saying that, I was like, well, geez, I had my epiphany weird moment where then
Yeah.
I decided to reevaluate my whole life. Was same thing, imagining what my future life of being a father, which we're both not yet, um, is going to be like, though.
Right. Right.
So were people, when you said I'm out, did they really try to fight you, or did they have a proper protocol? Did they understand, or was it they really were like, you had to twist your arm to leave, kind of thing?
Yeah. So it's kind of funny. Throughout my 13 years in the seminary, this whole process became more open, because early on, guys that would leave, they would leave at nighttime or really early in the morning, and you would get up the next morning
Whoa.
and you're like, dude, where is Jonathan? I haven't seen him in like 3 days. Where'd he go? And then you would just hear somehow that, yeah, he's gone. He left. So you would never
That
say
sounds so
goodbye.
culty.
They would just disappear.
That sounds like a cult.
So thankfully, when I left, I mean, this is a whole nother topic, but there were a lot of scandals with the founder of the congregation. So the congregation made a lot of changes, and one of those changes was to let the guys say goodbye who are going to leave. Just tell everybody, hey, I'm really grateful, or I'm not, and say your goodbyes. So it's not, like you said, it's not a cult. You're
Hmm.
not forced to stay here. If you don't want to stay here, you can leave and tell people, why you're leaving, and say your goodbyes. So that was a nice change, because I was able to say goodbye to my friends.
Okay.
And everybody knew a few months before I left that I was going to leave.
Okay.
And it wasn't awkward. They weren't shaming me. They weren't making me feel guilty. It was really, and it was really beautiful because there was a lot of just gratitude for the years that I've given to the seminary and a lot of support. And it was funny, man. So a week before I left, I don't have any clothes. I've got my black cassock, my white collar. Yeah, I've got my monk robes. So they take me to the shopping mall. They buy me shoes, basketball shoes, and jeans. I hadn't put a pair of jeans on in 12 years.
Wow.
Like, oh my God, what is this? And
it just seems so foreign. That's so wild.
Yeah. Yes. Crazy. I'm like putting on a Nike shirt and I'm like, whoa, this isn't a white polo shirt. This is crazy. So very generous. They bought my plane ticket home, which was not cheap.
Yeah.
And that's a story in and of itself, going from the seminary to Sin City, Las Vegas.
And I want to get into that. But was it also was it understood you were just leaving the seminary and you didn't want to be necessarily a priest anymore? But also, was it like you were leaving the religion and it's like, I actually don't even really believe that this is real anymore? And so what was, because it's two different things, right? Like, oh, I'm still going to go to church on Sundays and get what the tithing or whatever it's called, like 10% of whatever, I'll give money to the church. Or is it just like, yo, peace, like come out, like.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it was, I don't think I could have gone to that extreme of just saying, peace, I'm out, I'm done with Catholicism, just because that was so imbued in my life since I was 13 years old.
Okay.
And I was happy. If I had been abused in some way, emotionally, sexually, physically, yeah, I'm sure I would have just left and been extremely upset. But I spent 3 years of my life thinking about this decision of whether to leave or to stay. And that was a thought that was in my mind, in my heart for 3 years, every single day, because I was so happy.
Mm-hmm.
So happy there. I was receiving a fantastic education, just meeting incredible people, funny, intelligent, well-spoken, handsome, well respected in the community, in the city, and in the church. So it was really hard for me to leave, and I left on really good terms. Like, I wanted to really continue practicing Catholicism with great fidelity when I left. Like, I was going to church 2-3 times a week, saying the rosary 2-3 times a week, going to confession every week. Like, when I left, I was still practicing as if I was almost still in the seminary.
Wow. Okay. So then there is, I didn't know that about you.
Yeah.
Because I kind of thought it was just, I'm all out. And I know that you came back from in Chile and you ended up in Vegas of all places meeting your family.
Yeah, that's right. You want me to talk about that a little bit?
You definitely need to. I mean, it's just, I can't even imagine going from the seminary where, sex is just so suppressed and it's a sin, unless it's in marriage and all these things, and going to, of course, Sin City, and it just must have been literally, for This Is Mental Health, right, Joe, about Logan Noon, a bipolar experience, one side of the coin to the other kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember calling my parents and giving them the news that I was going to leave. It wasn't a shock to them because they knew I had spent the 3 years prior thinking about this decision. Okay. So it wasn't a shock. And I just said, hey, Mom, where can I meet you and Dad? I know you're on a motorcycle adventure somewhere. So where are you guys? And she's like, oh, we're in Death Valley, California. So the closest airport is actually Las Vegas. So you need a one-way ticket to Vegas. I was like, okay. And I told the Father Superior, I was like, hey, Father Adolfo, I need a plane ticket to Las Vegas. And he's like, what? You need a
Yeah.
plane ticket where? So, yeah, he was quite shocked.
And you were like, I'm going to see my parents. And he was like, oh, sure.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Your parents, not the strip club, your parents.
And I was so naive. I didn't even really understand what I was getting myself into. I just thought, yeah, I'm going to Las Vegas because that's where my parents are. I didn't think, oh, this is like
I'm
the
gonna go
gambling
see some titties for the first time in
strip
my life.
clubs, Yeah,
Oh my
I had no
God.
idea.
And you were how old again at that stage?
I'm 28 years old, man.
Wow.
I don't even
Wow.
know I don't know my social security number. I
Uh-huh.
don't know what a credit card is. I
You've
don't
never
have
probably worked a job, right? Because you left so
no,
early.
no.
Yeah.
Never worked a job. Didn't know what a credit card was. Didn't have a bank account. Didn't have a car. Like I'm literally a 28-year-old in like a teenage mindset and life experience.
Yeah. It's just, and then the transition, I feel like continues to just go further because, like you said, you were kind of practicing in the church at first.
Right,
You don't do
right.
that today, to my knowledge.
I do
And
not.
you now are in your third year of medical school. So, like, how did you go from that point of showing up in Vegas of what the hell? Like, it must have just been so eye-opening to where you are today.
Yeah. It's a this is gonna be a lengthy response, but I'll try to make it synthetic.
No, there's no time limit on the podcast show. Beauty of the internet, baby. I pay for hosting. It's all good.
So you want to know how I went from this Vegas experience to medical school?
Well,
Or
I mean, now I feel like we're getting a little more into like the mental health aspect of it, and I guess to give your vocal cords kind of a rest here, a big transition towards me actually becoming more mentally healthy was actually abandoning spirituality and my religious beliefs.
yeah.
And it wasn't a direct cause. It's not like I was in despair because of my religious beliefs. But let me explain. So I was very, very depressed, very, very anxious. And because of the stigma around going to see a therapist and I think being a male, talking about feelings, I just didn't want to do it. I just drank. And what I would also do is try to pray my anxiety away. And or my depression away. Just, I hope I feel better and like just keep praying. And I at that time was sort of religious. I mean, believed it, started to have some doubts as I understood science truths more and took a biology class and chemistry class. And, so starting to have some doubts, but I just kept praying my anxiety away. And, obviously it led to me getting in the psych ward because I prolonged my treatment. And I think I prolonged my treatment because I believe simply praying would make things better like that.
Yeah.
And, it just was like similar to you. It was years where eventually where I sit now, I just kind of just really try to think of the world so much more logically and base my beliefs only on truths that can be proved through scientific thought. And so I've really kind of now turned more into an atheist.
Hmm.
And I try to approach that with everything, even with the concepts we learned in medical school, where sometimes I'm like, I no, like if you can't prove it to me, I don't believe it's a thing.
Hmm.
And I almost really lack any spirituality at this point. And I think that makes some people feel weird, but I don't want to necessarily say I can prove that there is no spirits or no God, but it's like there's
Hmm.
no evidence, so I'm not going to think that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in my short ramble, giving you your vocal cords a break there, like
Yeah.
you obviously had this trait about you that you wanted to serve others, but so how
Right.
did you switch that serve others of serving God to serving healthcare?
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. That's a great question. Um, so my dad would take us to visit the sick in the hospital when we were little kids after school. He would say, "Oh, let's go visit the elderly." And he would just take us into rooms and introduce us to people and just kind of talk to them as if they had been lifelong friends, and then always ask them for advice for his sons at the end of at the end of the visit. And that really impacted me as a kid. Just to, one, feel comfortable in the hospital setting, two, learning to talk to people who I knew were suffering, and three, I think it's taught me compassion and empathy for people that were suffering and at the end of their lives, a lot of them. So that, along with my dad having polio and now post-polio muscular atrophy, I pretty much not grew up, but the hospital was a very familiar place for me. Mm-hmm. And then my younger brother Dylan, was a doctor already. Well, he was a third-year medical student when I left.
Oh, okay.
And I remember talking to him on the phone and just telling him, hey, this isn't for me, I'm going to leave. And he said, well, why don't you just go to medical school?
Yeah, hell yeah.
And I thought about it, and I was like, maybe I should. I'm still going to take care of people, not necessarily on a spiritual level, but take care of their body and their mental health, their emotional health, their biological.
I would even argue sometimes spirituality health. It's all encompassing. If spirits are such a thing, they are in our body, I guess, right? Or something like, and it's, you're treating the person. And if that's something that they believe in, you are treating that in a sense.
Absolutely. And I kind of just thought, I'm just going to switch my mentality from wanting to take people and help them get to heaven to wanting to get them healthy,
Yeah.
It seemed like a kind of a natural transition. I didn't understand how difficult it was going to be.
Yo también, yeah.
All the prerequisites and all the standardized tests that I was going to have to go through, but it always seemed worth it to me.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a satisfying answer.
Well, it is. It is. And, it's a long endeavor, very similar to the journey to becoming a full-blown priest, but it is a worthy endeavor in some regards. Mm-hmm. But, I don't want to speak to your beliefs, but let me tell you what I understand about you and tell me if it's not accurate. And I kind of want to see how you got there. So I remember when I first met you, must have been within the first week or two of us meeting, you took me on, I think, the best hike I've ever been on the Pacific Crest Trail, the Knife's Edge. Maybe with this episode, we'll put up some photos from that trip, because that was really a memorable. One of the, I was so new to the Northwest, I didn't really know what hiking entailed up here, and being able to see these two massive peaks that I think were volcanoes at one point. Were they volcanoes?
Yeah, so we're looking at Mount Rainier and I think Mount St. Helens.
And Adams we must have been able to see.
Oh, Adams, yes.
And so I guess we could even see Mount St. Helens from there too, because it was just the coolest experience, and listeners, check out the photos on my Instagram page to do it justice. But I remember on that evening when we were all just kind of getting to know each other, you were telling me parts of this story. You were saying, now my beliefs are, God doesn't necessarily lay within the pages of a Bible, but God or spirits or whatever to me is out in this forest, in these views. This is my spirituality. This is my sanctuary, I remember you saying.
Yeah.
So how did your spiritual beliefs kind of adjust from? It almost sounds more like an approach similar to a Native American in a sense, right? Mm-hmm. And how did you transition to those beliefs?
Yeah. So it's kind of definitely gradual. I would say, first of all, I wasn't necessarily practicing Catholic morality.
Yeah. What did that mean?
We'll leave that up to the imagination of our
listeners, Google it if you don't get what we're referring to.
And experiencing just a lot of guilt. A lot of, what is commonly called Catholic guilt.
Yes.
Or,
forgive me, Father, for I have sinned.
not being chased, and that, oh man, caused, just destroyed me, like mentally and emotionally. I just felt like, oh my gosh, I'm going to hell.
Yep.
I'm not celibate anymore. I'm going to hell. If I die in a car accident right now, I'm condemned to hell for the rest of my life. And it was just a terrible, terrible experience and way to live the day. So much so that I would like call up the priest that I knew in town and say, Father, can I go to confession today? Because
Mm.
I'm in mortal sin right now and I don't want to die,
Yeah.
because I'm going to go to
Wow.
hell. I'm going to go to hell if I die. And man, that happened, a number of times.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, I'm not sure. And maybe this is me just looking for a cop out, just to justify my new moral standards, and maybe not wanting to feel this guilt and this sense of condemnation any longer. That might be part of it.
Hmm.
So that was one aspect of me kind of stepping out of one Catholic moral teaching and then stepping out of the church, and
Well, and just like being like, I shouldn't have to feel guilty all the time for every single thing that I'm doing.
right, or not guilty like I'm going to hell,
Yeah. Yeah.
like I'm going to be condemned for eternity. That was one aspect of it. Second aspect of it was going to Montana State University and sitting in on a multicultural awareness class, and they broke us up into small groups, and the professor said, I want you all to just freely express your thoughts about being gay. And so we broke up into small groups, and I said, you know what, I think gays are gay because they were either sexually abused when they were kids, or they had a bad experience with their dad or their mom. And I remember one of the girls in my group, she says, Ben, I'm lesbian and I tried to date guys. I have a great relationship with my parents. I was never sexually abused. This is just who I am. I was honestly born this way, that I have a tendency to like women. And I tried to like guys because that's what society told me to do. And
Yeah.
I wasn't attracted to them. And for the first time in my life, I was like, oh my, are you kidding me? Are you lying to me? Or is this
Hmm.
the real deal? And I felt truly she was being sincere and real with me. And so I was like, man, there are people that are born this way with these tendencies. And why is Catholicism teaching us that this is inherently an evil and wrong? If we believe that God is the creator of all things and he created them this way. And I met more and more people like that and became friends with them, and so I was like, man, I don't feel like I can partake in the Catholic Church because I don't agree with their moral teaching on homosexuality. I
Yeah.
don't agree with their teaching on contraceptives. I love some of their virtue teaching about charity and kindness and patience and philanthropy. I love that.
Yeah. Me too. And when I remember discussing with my parents that I no longer really wanted to go to church with them ever, and I would maybe do it out of courtesy once a year or something, I would say the same things. It's like, listen, I like all of the community aspects of the church, getting together, wishing good for each other's families, just like seeing each other, going to a place and socializing. Like that is all wonderful. And like, I believe in that. But this other stuff where I remember, telling my dad, like, this stuff is in the Bible that gay people are going to hell. Like, and I had some gay friends at that point, and
Yeah.
just like, what? Like, this is so stupid to me. And I was like, if I'm
Yeah.
questioning this, and I had a better understanding of like how old the world was and all this stuff. It was just like, this is stupid to me.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what my transition as well.
Yeah. I'm very grateful for everything that I received in Catholicism, but yeah, I just I don't feel right going to church and receiving communion. I do go with my parents.
Yep.
I don't receive communion, but I go because I know it's a respect, it's a sign of respect, as you said, towards my parents. It's kind of doing the same thing that you would do once a year or so.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
I
so now,
also
go ahead, Ben.
I also found that when I had recently left the seminary and was practicing Catholicism very fervently, I was very, very judgmental of people that weren't following Catholic moral teaching. Like I would have at that point have seen a gay couple and thought in my head, oh, they're sinners, they're bad people.
Hmm. Hmm.
I wouldn't have said anything, but I would have felt that and thought that.
Yeah. Well, it's what
Or
you've been taught for years.
yeah, yeah. And just very, very judgmental of the people that weren't following the black and white moral teaching of Catholicism. I didn't like that about myself. And that was another reason for me, I think, kind of stepping back and, as you said, finding my religion and my church in nature. I think, I love to hike and I love to bike, and those are my moments to connect with this divine being and thank him for my life and this creation that I'm immersed in.
Hmm.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, for me, nature, I don't necessarily look at it as a spiritual place necessarily for me, but more a meditative one. And you could argue they're exactly the same thing, to some people, you could argue meditation is essentially just a version of praying, I guess. But that's how I almost think of it's just where I can get in a place where I am totally can get in a state of stillness and just fully relax and just really appreciate my surroundings more than I can in an office like this.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
and so I guess we've been talking for a little bit now, and I want to get your take on a few things. As future doctors, we're gonna be, and I've already had it in my third year experience. For instance, like let's say we have a patient who is going through the transition of being gay, coming out, and maybe they come from a very religious family. That scenario happens all across America and the world. And
Yeah.
the doctor sometimes is in between that. And I think you're extremely well versed to be able to communicate with parents who may think, or entire families may be very religious and think like, oh no, like being homosexual or whatever is not right in the eyes of God. What would you say to those parents and those family members, like from with your background in being so well versed in like religion?
Yeah. Um, I I would tell them, what your son or what your daughter needs is support. Regardless of what you believe morally to be right or wrong, this is your son or this is your daughter. They want to feel support and love from their parents, regardless of what their moral beliefs are. Because I feel like we're going through life, and religion tells us that I wouldn't tell this exactly to the parents, but religion tells us that morality oftentimes is black and white, and
Yeah,
the more time I spend in medicine, and the more I speak to people, I realize that it's really not.
it's great. Yeah.
It's really, really gray. People do things often with a background of reasons why and a history that's really complicated to understand. But I think what everybody wants on earth is support and wants to feel loved and accepted.
Mm.
And as physicians, I think we're in we play a very key role as you say, in people's lives where they're going through this, maybe a sex change or what have you, and to be non-judgmental and extremely supportive and respectful of the dignity of that person, whatever their choice may be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and I've talked to my girlfriend about abortions, and I don't feel comfortable as a physician actually performing an abortion, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to shame a woman for wanting to have an abortion. I'm just going to refer her to a good physician who can actually do that safely, that procedure. But I myself don't feel comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
It does. I mean, and it just brought up other kind of interesting questions. And let me just quick fire now for the last like 5-10 minutes that we chat
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
So in what ways do you feel spirituality helps out with someone's mental health and maybe physical health, well-being? And when does it not? When does it hurt people's physical health or mental health or well-being?
Yeah, I think it helps in that it kind of gives us the security of, hey, I think I'm practicing these virtues that my spirituality is telling me to practice. So, that might give me some endorphins, and I feel good about myself, because I'm following these spiritual principles or morality. I think it can hurt us, as it hurt me in being very, very harsh on people, and very judgmental. If you're not following Catholic moral teaching, therefore you're a bad person, and I don't want to be your friend, or I don't want to spend time around you. And that hurt me, and I think that can definitely hurt other people. Yeah.
Well, and I think when I went to a Catholic undergrad school, and when I really started to question religion more was when I learned about other religions and how they kind of seemed all the same to me. They had
Mm-hmm.
the same core values, and a lot of times you'd hear, our God is the only God, there's no other God like this, all the other ones are bullshit. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just like, a lot of them just seemed kind of the same.
Yeah.
And, so I don't want this show to serve as, if someone's religious, fine. But I do think it's important, like we're saying, be open-minded. Things aren't always so black and white.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I think there's people out there that because they grew up in towns like yours where maybe the entire town is religious, maybe the entire family is really religious, they feel like they don't have the choice to leave a religion because it's just so ingrained in their family life, in their home, their environment, and
Yeah.
you really experience that to the extreme. So what advice would you give people who are just having self doubts about their beliefs, but they don't feel in a comfortable environment to fully express them, kind of thing?
Yeah. Good question. I would say talk to a mentor or somebody that you look up to and that you think has good life experience and is wise, and express yourself to them and your struggles. I mean, we all have doubts and we all have struggles. Um, Life, like we said, it's not black and white; it's gray, and even sometimes how we should act or decisions we should make aren't clear. But I think we need to be true to ourselves, and it was really tough for me to be true to myself and sometimes confront my parents on moral issues that I didn't agree with.
Yeah.
Because obviously I love my parents. I respect them highly, and they've done so much good in my life. But when it came to like homosexuality, I just said, I don't agree with Catholic teaching about that. And I got into some serious arguments with my dad,
Mm-hmm.
like where we were going at it. I had never as an adult, even as a kid, confronted my father and disagreed with him and raised my voice at him. That was like, oh, you don't do that with dad. but I did, just because I truly believed what I was saying.
Yeah.
And that was hard for me. And it created some tension.
Yeah.
And I've learned in my own family to not don't talk about religion, you know,
Yeah.
because it's divisive, where religion should like bring people together and like create this community and this harmony. Sometimes it can really be dividing.
Yeah.
And
Well, and
so
even atheism, you could almost argue is dividing, because it almost is a religion in itself. Like, I remember when I first kind of fully adopted an atheist viewpoint, having conversations with the people I'm closest to who are religious, like my parents. And I remember asking simple conversation, okay, so did this one woman really get pregnant from never having sex, like as a virgin? Like, I don't think that was a real thing. Like, I understand it was as I learned biology more, like I said, in college, and it's like, I don't think that happened. Like, I think she had sex and got pregnant. Like, that's it.
yeah,
And my parents and I really arguing that, and it
yeah,
just, it,
yeah,
like I said, it did create a lot of tension, and I never want to see religion tear families apart, because
right,
it's at the end of the day, it's only one part of our identity, and
right,
there's a lot of gray. Like, I just try to almost look at atheism as gray. It's like, no, I don't necessarily believe in a higher power, but I can't disprove that.
mm-hmm,
And it's so, I think just having the acceptance, like, there's good people who are atheists, there's bad people, there's good people who are Catholics, and they're of course bad. And you can say that about any religion. And I think that like you said, we keep kind of saying towards the end here, like, just accepting that everything is a little gray, and it's not so black and white binary, is the best way to really handle
yeah.
all these matters.
Yeah, and as life goes on, I may end up back in the Catholic Church. I don't know. There's part of me that does like going to church every Sunday and having that time to just forget about work, and just pray and meditate.
I
I
miss, you know what I miss? Coffee hour. I don't miss sermons. I don't miss anything else
yeah,
in the
yeah,
actual. But
yeah,
you know what? Those times, they were typically when I used to go with my parents right after church, where there would be coffee and donuts, and you'd hang
right,
out
right, right.
and just chill. And it wouldn't even be families that I was very close with, but it just, in that sense of community, I think, is sometimes lost.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do leave a religious community, it's almost, and I do think they emerge in other ways. Like, you go on group bike rides,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, in the midst of a bike ride, me and you have talked about it, sorry, talking for too long now, talked about it before. When you're biking or doing something you love with other people, you're not thinking about anything else, and that's such a beautiful
Right.
community, and I would
Yeah,
argue maybe even a spiritual experience, because you're all just like in the same moment,
yeah,
really enjoying each other's company, and that's
absolutely.
super important.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think community is a big positive aspect of organized religion. But like you
Hmm.
say, I do think you can find that community in other things, in other activities like biking. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah. Well, hey, dude, we've been talking for about an hour. Any last words of advice for the listeners?
Well,
All five of them.
no, thanks for having me on your podcast. I really enjoy talking about my past because I see different aspects of my life when I talk about it that I hadn't seen before.
Hmm.
Just kind of developing the story. So I appreciate that aspect. I just want to tell people to just be really true to themselves and to, yeah, just treat people with a lot of respect, regardless of your religious beliefs or moral beliefs. And as you know, being a future psychiatrist, like, look at people with non-judgmental eyes and keen ears,
Hmm.
and with great respect. Um, I think you're going to have a very privileged place as a future psychiatrist doing that. But I think I think it would make society, you know, and our community such a better and more harmonious place.
Yeah.
If we practice that more. It's so hard to really listen to people. You know, one thing is hearing what they say. Another thing is actually listening to what they say. And I've learned that in my relationship with Jessica, how
Oh,
to
yes.
how to be a better listener. So, yeah.
Yeah. And well, dude, I think that was beautifully said. You know, I know you're really pursuing a career in physical rehabilitation, and what's the acronym again?
PM and R,
And what does that even stand for?
physical medicine and rehabilitation.
Okay, yeah, okay. I was in the ballpark. Either way, and you would do great at that. I know you would. But, you know, I also agree with some of your mentors who have told you that I do think you would be a phenomenal psychiatrist. You know, because just mental illness and spirituality go hand in hand. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have this, but a lot of people's psychosis involve thinking they had an experience with God, thinking that they are a God or Jesus. Like, you hear it all the time, specifically in bipolar disorder mania, of people
Yeah.
thinking like they're the second coming of Jesus in their manic episode kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, you know, who could be better equipped to handle a situation like that than a psychiatrist who was a trained minister for a decade of his life kind of thing. You know, so I must say, Ben, I know you still can always help out those adaptive skiing program on weekends and be a tremendous psychiatrist. Something food for thought. I think all the listeners today would agree. Well, thank you, sir, for coming on. What does the rest of your day look like? Are you running like 26 miles?
Oh man, Comat keywords.
When's your
Getting ready.
test?
December 13th.
Yo, that's in 3 weeks. You need to pump the brakes. You're fine.
Yeah, I will get out and do some cycling today. So one of the docs, her son lent me his fat tire bike.
Oh, let's go. Nice.
Yeah. So
I've actually never ridden a fat tire bike.
Oh, it's so much fun. So much fun.
Well, I'm gonna, like I was saying yesterday to you on the phone, I am in the market to buy a new bicycle because I crashed yours that you so graciously gave to me. Thank you for the good memories. I didn't. It wasn't a bad crash, you know, but it was a good story nonetheless. Having to carry my bike 2 miles in my freaking tight bike shorts with my fat like Donald Trump ass hanging out. You know? You need a pump? Nope. Just leave me alone, please. With no less this creep stash.
Yeah. It's a nice combo.
Well, dude, say hello to all your house members. I will be seeing one of them actually in about 24 hours. So that's kind of
right.
Cool.
That's right. Okay. Well, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, dude. This was a pleasure.
Absolutely. We will be in touch, Mr. Noon.
All right, brother. Take it easy.
Okay. You too. Talk to you later.